Blessings and love, everybody. I'm Eli Martyr. Thank you for joining me here in the secret classroom on the FreeMelon Society. Today, what we're going to do is we're just going to get into a quick concept that I'd like to introduce you to. And I want to discuss why it is that you should trust your body, why you should trust the innate intelligence of your body. I find that for the most part, we have completely disrespected the type of intelligence that we come equipped with. So first, I'm just going to apply some context. Then we apply it to our life in hopes of engendering a recognition of the intelligence within and why it is that you should pay attention to it. Okay? I want you for a moment to humor me with an exercise. At some point today, during this video, well, no, not during this video because then you won't be able to listen, but at some point during the day, I want you to just sit down and I want you to think about one particular thing. I don't care what it is. Think of a color, just the color blue, and saturate your whole being with just the color blue. Or think of a flame, okay? A candle with a flame. Think of a rose, an apple, any single simple object, a tiny little cube, a dice, a crystal, anything you want, okay? And I want you to hold that image in the blackness behind your eyelids, in your mind's eye, and just hold on to just that thing, just that one object, okay? Alternatively, you can focus on just your breath, your inspiration and your expiration, and you're focusing on just the feeling. There's no visual now, it's just the feeling. And focus only on that, and see if you can do it for about 5 minutes or so. If you can, fantastic. Now I'd like you to try to do the same thing for about an hour, or 5 hours, or 10 hours, okay? And here's the catch. The very second that you lose focus, and I'm talking 100% ultra fine detailed focus of that thing that you are concentrating on, if you lose it for just one moment, and a fleeting thought comes in from what you have to do today, a fleeting thought of anything, an emotion, a face, a feeling, any wandering thought that comes in, if you do that, the universe explodes and we all die. Mothers, fathers, cats, dogs, birds, hermits, buildings, all of it just explodes. There's lava everywhere. People are screaming, skin is falling off, whatever. The worst of the worst of the worst. That all happens if you lose concentration for just one fleeting moment out of merely an hour of concentration. Do you think you could do that? Would you be able to? Do you think that you have cultivated the level of internal thought control responsibility to be able to do that task and do it without failing every single moment, every single millisecond of every single day, month, week, right? On and on and on it goes, right? Beyond the hour that I've just tasked you with, or beyond the 5 minutes that I've just tasked you with. Now, when you juggle this around in your head and you realize that you are completely incapable of doing what I asked you to do here, I'm incapable of it. We're all quite incapable of this level of conscious evolution and refinement and sophistication and responsibility. Okay? We are not capable of that. Think of, and I've used this analogy before, think of how a mother or father protects their child when they're really young. When the child is really young, they have not cultivated a sophisticated level of responsibility such that they can go out into the world and make adult decisions. Okay? It requires time, maturity of mental evolution and mental sophistication to be able to have responsibility gifted to you, right? I'm sure you can understand this concept. Now, this relationship, this phenomenon of developing mentally or consciously and thus being tasked with more responsibility, this phenomenon does not end merely at our level. This phenomena spans the entire created universe. Okay, this is the second concept that I want to introduce you to. So the first one was that you do not have the level of mental sophistication, conscious evolution, conscious responsibility to be able to merely hold a thought construction in mind without erring for days, months, weeks, years, eternity. We do not have that level of sophistication. Okay, so that's the first concept. The second concept is this idea of responsibility being given to you as a conscious being the more you evolve consciously. So, with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah? So far you're with me, alright? There exists a phenomena of greater responsibility given to beings with higher conscious evolution capacity, okay? With a higher level of conscious sophistication comes more responsibility from nature. Alright? Okay, so I hope you guys are all on the same page with me. Make sure to stick with me on this because I can guarantee you're not going to find anyone in the plant-based health community talking about the stuff that I talk about here in the secret classroom. So, all matter in the created universe is governed by consciousness. All matter, bar none, full stop. Okay? No exceptions to that rule. Yes, even the grain of sand has consciousness, the plants have consciousness, we have consciousness, and everything above. So everything that has been imbued with the spark of life must be governed by consciousness, by a consciousness. Okay? All energies, extant energies in the universe, these are all governed and guided by a consciousness of some sort. And for the Newtonian reductionist, crippled thinkers out there, who want to deny that there's any kind of actual grand intelligence that runs the show. I mean, in order for laws and rules to exist, we have to infer the existence of a lawmaker. We see this in our very own human civilization. For particular laws to exist, there's got to be some body, some entity, some conscious being that is responsible for putting those laws out there, for making those laws. It works the same way in reality. Grab a thin steel plate, throw a whole bunch of sand on the plate, and then grab a violin string or whatever, some sort of sound instrument, and introduce a frequency, a sound frequency into that plate. What does it do? It organizes matter. And it organizes the matter in beautiful, harmonic, geometrically perfect shapes. What this is telling us is that there is law and order and structure to the universe. Unchanging, unbreakable law and order in the very fabric of reality. And in order for those laws to operate unceasingly, unchangeably, there needs to be a lawmaker, there has to be a level of consciousness responsible for ensuring that those laws run 24/7 without changing, without ever erring. Because if they did for just one moment, then it would spell the end of the universe as we know it. It would spell the introduction of absolute and utter chaos into life. And chaos is something that nature will not tolerate. Like I said before, all matter is governed by consciousness. You are governed by a consciousness. You have an evolved psyche that resides and permeates through your being and commandeers and guides and steers your physical body. Life on higher planes has the same type of consciousness. So all the conscious beings on planet Earth, and planet Earth being an organism, and thus it is governed by a consciousness as well. Now, just like every single molecule, every single atom and cell in your body is governed by a consciousness that is distinct and separate from your psyche. Because, as we know, if we do an out-of-body projection, if we lose consciousness, if we go to sleep, if we have lucid dreams, then we are still conscious in some magical way outside of the connection to our physical body. Yet, our physical body still operates. So it's as if there is a base level of consciousness that is affixed to your physical body, regardless of whether your psyche is attached to that body or not. So every atom, every cell in your body has this level of consciousness. And that level of consciousness, they all work together and harmonize together in order to operate the bigger vehicle, you, with your psyche, okay, with your consciousness. Planet Earth is the same. All the individual units of planet Earth, the human beings, the animals, all life forms, these operate in the same way that the atom's consciousness and the molecule's consciousness work in our bodies. Okay, like as above, so below. So all of our human consciousness, this all works together and provides the base level of consciousness for the planet Earth. Subsequently, this leads us to understand also that because the universe is constructed in a similar way across all scales of existence, it must be, and it is, that the planet also has a higher level consciousness, a type of psyche that resides in the planet. Okay? Much like our consciousness resides in our bodies, there is a higher consciousness, planetary consciousness, that resides in the planet. And the lower level base consciousness would be us, just like the relationship between the atoms and ourselves, okay? I really hope you're following me on this, okay? I'm trying to follow a very logical progression to be able to distill very deep and powerful esoteric occult concepts to you that you can think about and apply to your life without having to go to an occult mystery school and spend years and years studying, right? So, do you need me to recap? All right. First thing that we talked about is you do not have the level of responsibility to be able to merely hold a certain thought form in your mind without any distractions, okay? And we assumed that if you did have a distraction, it would be chaos and the world would end, okay? Let's just make that assumption. So that was the first thing to recognize about yourself.
Quick correction. Yes, you can hold a thought in your mind without distraction. You can, I can, many people can. And the advanced beings, the advanced thinkers, the advanced spiritual progressees, they can, in fact, do it for very long periods of time. Yes, I know that we can. Sorry, I didn't mean to suggest that you cannot. You can. It's just that under natural circumstances, human beings in a physicalized life don't have that ability come naturally. It's something that needs to be cultivated and trained, but it's not as instinctual as smelling a ripe peach and eating it type of deal, okay? It's also not something that we can do to the end of infinity, or typically for a year, without any breaks, right? It's just physical life isn't as prepared for that type of conscious evolution.
The second thing is that, consciousness, this is all coming off the top of my head here, so bear with me if I try to remember. I believe it was all matter is imbued by consciousness, okay? Oh, no, sorry. No, it was that responsibility. It was the dynamic of responsibility and conscious evolution, okay? So, the more consciously evolved the being, the higher the level of responsibility in nature, okay? And then the third thing is that all consciousness is imbued, all matter is imbued by consciousness, okay? All matter. And right now we are just fleshing out that concept a little bit more. So remember how earlier on in our example, where if you can't think of just your breath without making any other distractions, without doing anything else for a year, if you can't do that, then the world explodes. We have to understand that that there is a consciousness responsible for the laws that operate in the universe that are unbreakable. Meaning that some conscious being out there in the ether that has gone through enough evolution, enough earthly, worldly evolution, enough, on a bigger scale, planetary evolution. Like you cannot imagine the conscious sophistication and the level of intelligence that these types of evolved beings would have to have in order to be responsible enough to govern the laws that create the universe. Okay. Are you beginning to feel the concept that I'm trying to express here? So these laws, let's just take gravity to make it relatable. Okay. The conscious being responsible for that force of gravity is able to devote enough mental effort to that thing without any deviation. So no lapse in thought for ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. That conscious entity is doing what you're doing in meditation and thinking and guiding the force of gravity. And it does it perfectly forever. Okay? Now I'd like to submit to you that you cannot even begin to imagine how sophisticated a consciousness that requires. Okay? the level of responsibility that these higher evolved grand consciousness, like the consciousness that inhabits an entire planet, do you have any idea the sophistication and the type of responsibility that consciousness has been given by nature to allow it to control an entire planet? That is like, this is levels of intelligence, people, that again, we cannot even remotely wrap our heads around. Okay. And trust me, I'm getting to the point. Okay. I'm getting to why this is important. All right. So just bear with me. I know that our attention spans in the modern society are classically poor, but I'm really trying to distill very deep, potent information here for you guys. Why is this important? This is important because it is that same evolved, conscious, universally pervasive, infinitely loving force that is responsible for also permeating the universe and the stars and the galaxies and making sure all the laws operate right so things aren't colliding and exploding and, lizards don't just pop out of your neck for no reason, right? Because there's order and structure to everything. It's why liver cells don't just mutate into the alligator pancreas tissue, like for no reason, right? I guess there was only a certain amount of time before I would break into some really stupid analogy. But this level of orderly being, okay, and outrageously infinite intelligence, it is responsible for constructing your body from head to toe and constructing all of your sensitivities and constructing every single inch and stitch, physically and non-physically, that makes up you as a human being. Now, why that's important is because we have lost respect for what our bodies are and what they tell us about our relationship to food and the rest of the world. Okay. Obviously, I'm trying to relate this to health so that it makes sense to you. What is the difference between myself and the thousands of other people that live as I do in a very simple way, who seem to be so satisfied and complacent with far, far, far less in terms of eating and whatnot and dietary culture? Why is it that we seem to be more satisfied where the rest of the world has a hard time understanding how this could possibly be? The only difference I would say is that what I have done is I have simply made the assumption, recognized and made the assumption that the intelligent force of creation, God, who designed my body, right, did not do so in vain. And all of my sensitivities are there for a very highly God-ordained purpose that goes far beyond any intelligence that I could conceive of. And to imagine that I could outsmart that intelligence that is responsible for forming the worlds and the universes around us, for me to make the assumption that I can outsmart that intelligence, I recognize is very silly. And so the only thing that I've done in my life is to surrender to those sensitivities, to what I must assume was created by an orderly being that commands my respect. If I put an eggplant in my mouth and I notice that the taste is repulsive, I am compelled to recognize that that must be there for a reason that transcends my ability to think about it. If I try to outsmart this natural sensitivity, it would be me in error, not the natural relationship I have to the eggplant. If I have a soybean and I put the soybean in my mouth and I recognize this is absolutely awful, I can't bite into it, this should not be in my mouth, I must recognize that relationship to the soybean is there for a God-ordained higher purpose, right? A purpose that transcends my ability to conceive of what this relationship means. And so I'm respecting that and not finding ways to circumvent that relationship that has been placed on me from somewhere from the beyond. A little while ago, I made a video teaching you how to run on all fours like an animal. And that's all great and fun. It's a great skill to have, especially if you're like myself, you're doing a lot of film work. It's just a useful physical ability to have whenever you need it. Okay. Now, what I can't do is I cannot behave like an animal and actually chase down a deer and eat it, chase down a hyena, chase down a fox, chase down a rabbit. And even if I find some slower, weaker, poisoned, domesticated animals like chickens and pigs and actually do catch them running on all fours or running on my 2 feet, whatever, biting into them and eating them is an abhorrent thought. It's disgusting. Nobody wants to do that. We want to process foods before we eat them. So I am compelled and I am forced in surrendering to this intelligence that runs and operates my body. I must assume that I cannot do these things for a God-ordained purpose, for a purpose that transcends my ability to think about that relationship between myself and the food. And so I simply surrender to that and assume that the Creator knows better than me. And we can go down the list of all of the things that I no longer do in my life, with my diet particularly, okay, what I'm getting at. And when I recognize that I have a certain antipathy to a certain thing, right, that I could circumnavigate, I could find a way to work around, right? If I have to make a workaround process, then I'm one of the few who is willing to stop there and say, wait a minute, if I'm having to work around this natural sensitivity that has been given to me by creation, right? It may be me making the error and not the relationship of the food that, for my mind, has to be changed before I put it into my system. Okay? Now, tying this all together, what does this mean for us? What it means is cultivating a deeper respect for what your body tells you, a very deep level of respect for what your body tells you, because that intelligence is operating on scales of existence that you cannot even imagine how complex they are, right? And intelligent and beautiful and divine they are and how loving they are. It has programmed you with these sensitivities for a particular reason. And it is for this reason that I have recognized that I've surrendered to that in my life, which is what allows me to be happy and complacent and joyful and fulfilled, living this very minimal lifestyle that I do, because I am making the assumption that I have been placed in good hands, in the loving hands of creation, and I have, and so have you. And thus treating your body right, treating your body well, respecting the sensitivities of your body, and not imagining that we can fool our bodies by hiding and changing the nature of things that otherwise would be objectionable to us. Living as best we can for our situations, living as best we can and aligning with these sensitivities, these principles, these laws of life, okay? This, when one does so, seems to lead one in the direction of health, seems to align yourself so that you start to sail with the current and not against it or perpendicular to it. And this complete attitude of surrender to these natural sensitivities is, again, why I feel that I have been more successful with this lifestyle than many others. Respect the sensitivities of your body, okay? Think about them, really deeply think about them. And when you do, you will come to conclusions about your relationship to life, your relationship to the foods you eat that you may not have considered before. And these are worth our consideration because, like I always say, the world is at war with your health, your sanity, and your wellness and your being, right? So we have to cultivate a deeper level of responsibility, especially now, if we want to lead ourselves out of the hole that collectively we are digging for ourselves. Let's be good molecules to the body, right? Let's be good atoms to the collective. Let's be good human beings to the planet. And the more of us that do our part, that lift ourselves up consciously, that align ourselves with the protocols, the principles, and the laws of God, of nature, of the grand architect, the more of us that do this, the better humanity is going to be. Now, the very last thing before I go that I'd like to mention is, of course, because evil exists in the world, and because there are less than reputable influences that we are beset with 24/7, it has now become very possible for your sensitivities in your body to mislead you because they have been corrupted by influences that interfere with our ability to recognize our natural sensitivities, okay? So if a smoker's body is telling them, I want a cigarette, all right, I could say, listen to your body, and then they would do exactly that and continue to smoke, right? So obviously, we have to exercise a little bit of discernment here, all right, and a little bit of common sense. When the child says to their parents, I want pizza and candy and Coke, well, they're doing what I'm telling them. They're honoring the sensitivities of their body and reaching for these adulterated foods that end up crippling their bodies and making them sick. So why is that the case? It's because a combination of evil or greed and ignorance at the lower level has adulterated that child's natural sensitivities by giving them that which is not natural, which is not godly fashioned, and constructing their sensitivities based on those things. So in that case, okay, we have to recognize that the senses can be misled, and we need to have just some common sense about this, okay, before we just take what I said and then run with it. Eli said, respect your sensitivities. So I'm sensitive to ice cream, so I'm going to go and have ice cream all day. It's not what I mean.
And there's one very important thing that I have to add here that I forgot to add. Oh, so silly. But people will be confused between what I've said here in this lecture and other things that they find on the channel. Recognize that I am speaking in terms of a philosophical concept here, okay? An occult principle that can help to guide our actions and behaviors. It does not mean that perfection is the only way, right? In fact, it's almost impossible to be perfect. It does not mean never modify the things that you eat in any way. It doesn't mean that. It's just something that helps to guide your behavior, okay? In many cases. That's the point. It's a philosophical concept that you can use to enhance the quality of your life. It is not a philosophical concept that you must apply to its absolute perfection. Otherwise, you should feel guilty, all right? That is not what is being said here. Now, also recognize that on this channel, I am catering to an audience. I'm catering to the public at large. And I will be in the future, more than likely, and I have in the past, made recommendations, given tips, meal ideas, so on and so forth, that I might not necessarily do in my own life, but I can, with no qualms, prescribe to people for the general public, because in relation to the damaging things that they could be doing, the things that you find on this channel are infinitely healthier choices to make, all right? But of course, everybody's at different levels. So if there's something that doesn't align with you, then you simply don't do it. And if it does help you on your path, then you can try it, right? You could say that dehydrated foods are a way of circumventing the natural sensitivities that you're designed with, right? And you would be right with that. It's a way to use human ingenuity to be able to change and modify the type of food you're eating. Of course, if you're applying the principle that I'm talking about here to make the choice to use dehydrated foods as opposed to a store-bought pizza, then that is an infinitely better choice. In the dehydrated fruit, you are still eating something that you could very well eat in its natural state, all right? But you're using a little bit of ingenuity to modify something that you could eat naturally. And in so doing, you make a healthier practice. When you make a tea of certain things that you wouldn't necessarily eat, and that you aren't eating in the tea, but you only extract the essence, and thus make a very, very, very light liquid, then yes, this is a modification that we can make to food. I have no problem recommending these things for a health and wellness oriented channel that is going to be received by the general public. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is a staple practice in my life. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make it a staple practice in your life. It is simply an option for those people that choose to use those things, who are at a place where those types of options are helpful for them, okay? So very important that I get that out there. Perfection is not the goal, okay? But we can use philosophical concepts that describe perfection and use them to make intelligent choices, okay? That's the important thing here, and I hope this helps you in your life.
My lovely and beautiful students, thank you so much for attending class today, as I like to stylize this channel sometimes. So yeah, really appreciate your time and your energy and your support. So if you like this video and videos like it, make sure to subscribe to the FreeMelon Society, where we try to give you and present you with important concepts and sometimes just have a little fun too. But anyhow, yeah, give this video a thumbs up, give it a like, and hit the bell notification so that you won't miss any other videos that I release on this channel. And that's it. We'll see you guys next time here in the classroom. Take care, everyone. Love you very much. All right. Enjoy. Bye-bye.